I appreciate everyone taking 30 minutes out of their day and maybe a little bit more than that to participate in the first coffee break that I have presented. And I'm very excited to do this and share this opportunity, I think, with everybody that's on the call. What we're talking about today is Azure planning and design. And with me, I have Larry Yu, and Larry is part of a business unit. And I'll introduce anybody to our business unit and our new organization as we get through the presentation. So Larry is the technical one, and he's going to do the presenting, but there are a couple of housekeeping things that I want to address initially, and an introduction to Broadview and to MSP Corp, and then it'll get underway. So first of all, I think most of us are familiar with Teams. However, just as a reminder, everybody should be set to mute. So if you do want to ask a question, and we would encourage that, please raise your hand under the icons here. There's a chat window as well. Feel free to ask your questions. And if you are asking a question, like me, or if you're like me, I often forget that I'm on mute. So just a reminder, unmute yourself. We would love to make this as interactive as possible. It's a small group. Most of you know who I am. Most of you know who Broadview Networks is, but some of you may not know that Broadview Networks has recently become a part of MSP Corp. And we're part of an organization of 15 managed service providers, managed security providers, and Microsoft providers across the country. We're located in 7 provinces. We're in the Northwest Territories, and the depth and breadth of our bench has just gotten bigger and better. And that's really where Larry and his team come to the table. Larry is part of MSP Corp, a business unit. The business unit is Soft Landing, located in Vancouver. Larry, I think you're located in Southern Ontario, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And has tremendous experience and knowledge when it comes to Azure and Azure development. And one of the reasons that we wanted to host this coffee break was just to provide an introduction to those who are attending on the capabilities we have to help you develop that transition plan to Azure if you're on that journey. So really, I'm going to hand the reins of the conversation for the most part over to you, Larry. Introduce yourself, take it away. And again, I encourage everybody on the call to be as interactive as you'd like to be.
Awesome. Thanks for that great introduction, Nora. As Nora said, my name is Larry. I have been with Soft Landing for a few years as an enterprise architect. I've been in the industry probably, I guess you can use the century unit now for more than a quarter of a century. And my background is mainly infrastructure, security, data centers, and a lot of that server hardware stuff. So um, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years in the Azure space, and a little bit more if I'm counting the sort of transition and learning Azure. Way back when this started, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they sort of just plopped this cloud stuff on us. It's probably close to 10 years ago. There was no concept of what a landing zone is. So I really wanted to talk about this particular term. There's some misnomers, there's some misunderstandings of what it is. So 10 years ago, they gave us this cloud, and people would go on and create a VM or some kind of service there, and just build from there. But there was no guideline, there was no framework, there was no proper best practices, as we like to say in the industry, about how to go about as an infrastructure person, as somebody who's worried about security, as a organization going to the cloud and possibly exposing all their environments in one way or another to the public internet. There's nothing there protecting us in terms of governance, in terms of best practice. And really, when it comes down to it, that's what Azure Landing Zone is. So it's a best practice framework for deploying an Azure environment. When, as an infrastructure person, I learned Azure from an infrastructure lens. When I create an environment in a data center, I purchase a firewall, I run the cables, I research the hardware I have to put in to get my services published to serve my users. And that's really what the Azure Landing Zone is uh, here in terms of Azure, in terms of the cloud. So best practice framework. Now, this screen that you see here, if you Google or I gotta say Bing now, right? Because we're talking about Microsoft. If you Bing Azure Landing Zone, chances are you're gonna see one of these things. And this is literally verbatim. This is the exact thing I saw when I Googled or Binged Azure Landing Zone the first time. I was like, oh, what is it? And when I saw this, I was like, well, I have 2 VMs on my cloud infrastructure and a virtual network, and all this this seems all really gratuitous to me, and it's very overwhelming. And from afar, there's a lot of things there. Like there's things to this day. Well, I know what all of them are now, but when I first saw it, I had no clue. And why do I need these things? What are these things? And this has nothing to do with what I know, which is networking, firewalls, routers, switches, computers, servers, all that stuff. So let's dive into this a little bit more. I'm sure we can make it a little more clear, right? So in the middle of that diagram is really where all the complexity lies, but it's not as complex as you might think. There, with Azure comes your tenant. And in your tenant comes a few things, right? The ability to create subscriptions, or AKA ability to give Microsoft your money. There's also what's called Azure Active Directory, or Entra ID as it's called now. This is an outdated diagram. And it really binds everything together, right? So it's going to become your identity provider. It's going to give you the role-based access. It's going to give you the ability to apply multi-factor authentication to everything that you connect to your tenant with, right? So below Azure Active Directory is what we call management groups. And what management groups are, it really is just the framework for role-based access on your tenant level, so that you can delegate who you want to manage on either resource groups or subscriptions, how and who you want to manage. So you can say, okay, this group of people, group A, can manage this particular development subscription, for example, or this particular group can only, or the accounting can only manage this other subscription that contains a resource group with accounting resources and accounting data in it. So basically a way for you to limit the ability for too many people to access all your resources, and sort of funnel your management and your delegation of your resources to people who are supposed to have them. And really, it serves as the basis for role-based access.
So maybe it's a good time now just to ask the question, does anybody on the call have a landing zone established, or does anybody on the call have a footprint in Azure today and want to share sort of the state that they're at? Crickets? Okay.
Does
You want
anybody
me
have
to
any
go?
questions, actually?
Yeah.
I did jump from sort of like was an Azure Landing Zone and just plop this diagram in front of you guys. And if you're anything like me, I would be like, oh my God, what the hell is this?
Any questions at this point from anybody on the call? Okay. Oh, there we go.
All right.
No questions.
No questions.
Thanks, Tyler. You want me to move to the next slide, Larry?
Yes, please. So going back to that, going back to the main landing zone slide at the bottom, there was 4 subscriptions, and I sort of just zoomed into the 2 of the 4. Like I mentioned before, subscriptions are a way for you can manage them with the management groups, and it's a way for you to pay. So you can have one subscription dedicated to connectivity, as you see as on the subscription on the left. This is in a typical Azure Landing Zone. This is where things come in and out. This is where all your traffic is routed through. You have another landing zone. This one's labeled A2. I can call this one my production subscription. All my production resources, including virtual machines, app service plans, anything that has to do with keeping those up, resiliency, recovery services, backup, all that stuff that has to do with your production is here. What you can also do is create replicas of this subscription and call them other things like development or UAT or staging. And then you can have copies of the subscription elsewhere where you can do your tests on. You can link them, you can unlink them through, see in the middle of the diagram there, VNet peering. You can share traffic, you can share data through the different subscriptions. But at the same time, because of the management groups we just talked about, you can limit the access to who has what, access to what. This comes in, this is vital actually, when you're deploying code or where you're taking copies of IP where certain, because of segregation of duty, certain roles that you have in your organization can only do one certain thing and not something else. Right? So you can keep that separated.
So just to give you a real life example, Larry and I worked with a client local here in Manitoba. The business units were asking the IT team to establish an environment in Azure for a variety of reasons. They had they had a line of business application that was shifting from a third-party data center, and they wanted to move it to Azure. They have BI or a data analytics team in the environment, and they wanted to establish and move some of that infrastructure and some of that reporting and illustration of that reporting into Azure. And the IT team had familiarity with what Azure was, but like most of us, when we get started with something new, we didn't know what we didn't know. So they engaged our team. Larry was the technical resource that helped, if you like, demystify Azure, helped establish the framework for the landing zone, which established the security and the governance parameters. So now when any business unit goes to the IT team in this organization, there is a model and a standard for executing new resources or new services in Azure. And that's really what Larry tried to say at the beginning. We all get started by playing in that sandbox. And think about it, when you adopted Microsoft 365, we had a lot of customers and clients, and even ourselves, we started developing team sites. But we didn't develop team sites with governance wrapped around it, with security wrapped around it. So now that we've been through that process and understand that we had to move backwards in order to move forwards in a standardized fashion and a secure fashion, we're able to come to the table for our clients and do the same thing with Azure. Where should you get started? Why should you start with a framework that can scale up and scale out, that you understand, so that you can address your business requirements and address your security, IT security requirements at the same time? And these are the components that are needed. Is that a decent summary, Larry, in your view?
No, that was perfect. And I also noticed that Tyler added a comment about his particular use case in the chat there.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was just reading that, yeah, I think in terms of just 3 VMs, and I'll talk about the VMs or what we call infrastructure as a service in a bit. But I think in this situation, Tyler, that you mentioned, yeah, you can obviously just have two subscriptions, one for connectivity where people maybe VPN in or whatever, wherever, maybe that connectivity subscription also has a site-to-site VPN to an on-premise network that has more infrastructure, and then you can have one other subscription for the 3 VMs. Now, if you do need a staging environment or a sandbox or something to play with that similar setup, yes, you can definitely use templates or scripting to duplicate those in a dev environment or a non-prod environment of some sort, and go from there. What's great about Azure, and I'll touch upon microservices in a bit, but and slightly, didn't I wasn't necessarily going into that much detail, but there's certain things like logic apps where you can actually say, okay, at a certain time in my dev environment, I want VMs to shut down or turn off automatically. I actually just worked on something where it's if a CPU has less than 20% utilization for 15 minutes at a time, shut that VM off. Those types of controls are available for you in Azure as for cost savings, for automation, all that stuff in Logic Apps and microservices. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Larry, you want me to go on the next screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the goal of this really was to give you a taste and start with the complex nature of Azure, but it's really, when we break it down into bite-sized pieces, we can all consume it better. And when we put it back together, it makes more sense. So, Larry?
Yep. Yeah, just like Nora said, here's the same diagram. As you can see, once we sort of explain that management group in the middle, the subscriptions, along the bottom, the different types of subscriptions, it's really not that complicated. This particular uh, setup has flat subscriptions. A lot of times we like to do what's called a hub spoke layout, where we have a bunch of subscriptions all connected to a connectivity subscription, and so that seems to be a typical layout. So in larger organizations, we usually recommend that.
And the other thing I think Larry and I have talked about really is the skill set that you and your teams have is really, it's truly not any different when you take the principles of an on-premise infrastructure to the cloud. There is some different language around it. There are some different practices about it. And again, just going back to the reason you're all sitting here, the workshops will help you understand what you don't yet know. It will also help you make decisions and make recommendations internally on how to structure that infrastructure and that network, if you like. Anything else you want to add, Larry?
Yeah, just to add on what you said in terms of skill set, for me, again, coming from infrastructure, when I wanted to move over, there was so many terms that I wanted that just didn't know, and I just didn't know how to wrap my head around all these different types of resources, which are, the smallest unit of measurements here in Azure, and it took me a while to figure it out that like an IS server can be done in a platform as a web app. Just to make those mappings, once that was done, and once I could sort of prove to myself that, hey, look, everything I did on-prem, I can do just as efficiently and just as easily. In fact, a single pane of glass to monitor all my resources. All of a sudden, it became clear to me that, hey, look, this stuff's not going away. This stuff is making my life easier. I am, paying Microsoft for some of the services, but a lot of it works out very, very well. Now I'm just going to touch a little on this screen here, just a comparison between what I would consider traditional IT, which is everything's in a data center, all the way up to software as a service. So um, a lot of us are coming from traditional IT. We have a data center. We have servers in them. We have storage in them. And on the servers, we install hypervisors, operating systems, the applications, and we publish it out through a firewall, right? And so we manage everything from subscriptions to licenses to the updates and hotfixes on the operating system, the applications, any libraries and runtime that we need to run the application, and storage in the backend. We're responsible for everything, and probably about every 5 years we got to go through and replace all of them, and that is the biggest headache in the world. On the other side, software as a service, many of you are using this already. A great example, M365, QuickBooks Online. Probably the first exposure that any of us had to software as a service, Hotmail, Gmail, right? We don't have to manage the servers at all. We pay a fee, a subscription, and that all that hardware, all the platform, everything is in the back. Now, this is obviously the most expensive, right? Because the hardware is everything's being sort of rented or lent to us. But sometimes, depending on what it is, and I think a lot of us Exchange admins, look back a few years ago before Exchange Online was around, and where you have to manage your DAGs and all your storage databases for your mail. You don't have to do that. Life is pretty good, right? A lot of other things fall in that category. Now, infrastructure as a service, for the longest time, and that's the second one from the left, that's basically your VMs and your networks in Azure. So they provide you the hypervisor. You don't have to deal with anything on that level. You don't have to deal with hardware. You don't have to deal with anything that is hosting your VMs. All you have to do is create your VMs and go. I used to think this was done. Like you completely evacuate your data center, put everything in VMs, and it was done. I used to think this was sort of the finish line, until I realized there's sort of the platform as a service, which to me is sort of what I want my where my resources to be. Now, like I mentioned before, IaaS is a great example. SQL is also another great example. You don't. It'd be so good not having to manage your SQL server, right? Not having to manage those backups and all that stuff that comes with it, right? And Azure provides SQL as a platform as a service module, resource. So you can migrate your databases in there and never have to log into or RDP or do whatever into a SQL server and run updates ever again. Right? All the backups, the replication, high availability, disaster recovery is handled within Azure on their environment, and all you have to do is enable it. Right? Websites, any of your web applications that you're hosting, anything on IIS, right? That's another great example. See if your code is compatible. If it is, great. Just upload it into Azure. You get a URL in Azure, and then you can assign your custom URL to it. You don't have to touch IIS ever again. And all of this you can put behind a load balancer. Azure Front Door, you might have heard. There's other load balancing solutions built in Azure. All of this you can put in behind like a backup solution that like Veeam, which is also available in Azure. All right, so all of a sudden it's not just VMs on somebody else's servers anymore, which I thought initially that's what the cloud was. So seeing all these PaaS services in there that enables me not to have to go in and do updates and hardware refreshes and patching and stuff like that. That was a breath of fresh air for me as an enterprise architect. I don't have to worry about those anymore. I can go ahead and do what I'm supposed to do, which is designing infrastructure and all that much better, right? So yeah, that's why I like it. Next slide.
And before we get there, anybody have any questions about what Larry's just shared? Again, trying really hard to make it interactive.
So here's a lot of what I touched on already. The types of um, the ability that you is not just types of resources that you can create. It's the enabling of the things that you can do from within Azure. All right. A lot of this is on a single pane of glass on a dashboard where you can go in and create resources. You can look at your costing. You can identify. You can enforce identity, which is huge, right? And this is one of the big things that is enabled when you move to Azure. Right. It used to be, hey, let's throw up a firewall. That is our, perimeter defense. And if things get past our firewall, well, too bad, so sad. Right. It's not security is no longer focused on infrastructure anymore. Security is all identity now first. Who can you prove who you are? Are you coming in because of conditional access? Are you coming in where you're supposed to be coming in from? Is the device that you're coming in from, is that an authorized device for you to be coming in to get company data on? All that's enabled through Intune, through a conditional access, through application proxies. All that's enabled within Azure in one place, right? So it's not just the infrastructure. It's not just vacating your data center. It's vacating your data center to a place where you can really lock things down and have control. Everything from your data through DLP to access, VPN access to all of that. Anything that your end user needs as well.
I think there's a
Okay.
question, Larry.
Yep. You can unmute, or are we going to?
Or is it in the chat?
Oh, it's in the chat. 2 subscriptions, you want to monitor the cost difference. Yeah. Oh no, it's just a response to Tyler's comment.
Okay, sorry.
So yeah, so really the question is how far you want to take your Azure journey, right? You can stop at, let's just go and move all our VMs up to Azure and be done with it. We don't have to worry about a data center anymore. We don't have to worry about hardware refreshes. But you don't have to stop there. And I think part of that journey is figuring out what's most beneficial to your organization and your IT team. They're going to have a lot to, a lot of say in this, to how much platform as a service and how much software as a service you want to incorporate into your Azure, because all those things are there. They work really well. They're very well integrated through identity authentication, respect. So how far you want to go. And really that conversation comes with getting to know the environment, your workflows, and the technology that you're currently using.
And there are a couple of other important pieces here. Speaking from the experience I've had in the marketplace and where I know our clients, what our clients' goals are, it's not an all or nothing. This is really helping to develop the transition plan for the applications and or the services that make sense to move into Azure, helping you understand budgeting once you are in Azure, understanding how to maximize the cost savings of Azure, because you don't want to just turn it on and leave it on and pay the bill at the end of the month. You want to manage the consumption of services in Azure based on your requirements, based on your goals, based on your needs.
Yeah, and it's not, again, you don't have, going back to the landing zone, you don't want to turn it on and start creating resources in there only to have a couple months down the road or a couple of years down the road, realizing that, oh, we should have done it this other way, and it's going to cost us time and resources to do it the right way. So, and that's really sort of the messaging here in terms of the landing zone. Let's do it the right way now and build on top of that landing zone so that every subsequent change is a change forward and we're not backtracking.
So you don't have to unwind or rewind.
Yeah.
So I am going to go to the next slide, and Larry, you may have to share this one just because I've had difficulty getting the content to turn on and turn up. But really, it's about what can you do next? What's your next step as far as Broadview and Broadview support is is concerned. And this is where I can't get the content of this particular slide to show up. So the reason we're having the coffee break is to share with you that we can develop a workshop. We sit down with you for an hour, talk about the current state of your environment, understand what your goals are, what you would like to learn, share with you what we think is important that you should know. And the workshops are anywhere between two, typically a minimum of 2 days of effort. And I've done some workshops that are significantly greater than that. It's about sharing our knowledge. So that's one thing we would be happy to talk to you about. So I don't know if anybody has, uh, there we go. Thank you very much, Larry. That's what I was trying to share. So, engage with us if it makes sense to engage with us. Give me a call or give Broadview a call and we can talk a little bit more about that. It's about developing that transition strategy. If you have hardware that's refreshing in the next 12 to 24 months, it's probably time to give some consideration to what you can do in Azure and determine even if it's a good move to move forward with. And if it is, what are the applications and services that are a great fit? There's also another component of this. We haven't touched on it today, but it's about building infrastructure changes that can extend to the cloud and the technologies that exist if you need traditional storage, but you're ready to extend some of your services to Azure. How do you do that on a hardware platform? And there are solutions that we can talk to you about that will, again, it's about bridging that transition. So we're at the bottom of the hour. I've used up your 30 minutes. Larry and I are available to talk to anybody who wants to stick around and ask any questions. And I want to say thank you to those who aren't sticking around. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope to have the opportunity to engage with you if this is the direction you're moving. So thank you very much.